Jake Holloway had always prided himself on finding things that weren't supposed to be found. It was a useful skill for a maintenance engineer at the Meridian Research Facility, where half the equipment had been installed by contractors who apparently believed documentation was just a suggestion. Today's mystery was a power drain in Sublevel 3 that had been driving the facility's manager crazy for weeks. Probably just another jury-rigged cooling system, Jake muttered to himself as his scanner beeped insistently at what appeared to be a perfectly normal concrete wall. The device had been acting up lately, giving false readings and occasionally displaying what looked suspiciously like alien hieroglyphs instead of proper diagnostic codes. He'd been meaning to get it fixed, but the repair department had a waiting list longer than his grandmother's grocery receipts. The electromagnetic signature was definitely coming from behind the wall, though. Jake knocked on the concrete with his knuckles, listening for the hollow sound that would indicate a hidden space. Instead of an echo, he got a faint vibration that seemed to travel up his arm and make his teeth itch. "Well, that's new," he said, stepping back and consulting his scanner again. The readings were off the charts now, literally. The needle had wrapped around twice and was making a sound like a dying cat. Either there's a fusion reactor behind there, or my scanner finally had the nervous breakdown I've been predicting. He'd seen enough poorly documented modifications in this facility to know that anything was possible. Last month he'd found a server room that was supposedly decommissioned in 2019 but was somehow still running 3 different climate control systems and what appeared to be a Bitcoin mining operation. The week before that, he'd discovered a storage closet that was bigger on the inside than the outside, which had led to a very awkward conversation with his supervisor about the proper use of sick days. Jake ran his hands along the wall, searching for any irregularities. His fingers found a section where the concrete felt different, smoother, almost warm to the touch. When he pressed against it, the wall responded with a soft hum that definitely wasn't coming from the building's HVAC system. "Okay, wall," he said conversationally, "I don't know what kind of science fiction nonsense is going on here, but I've got a job to do and a boss who thinks impossible is just another word for, Jake hasn't tried hard enough yet." The wall hummed louder, and Jake could swear he felt it vibrating in harmony with his heartbeat. A thin line of blue light appeared along the edges of what he now realized was a hidden panel. The light pulsed gently, almost hypnotically, and Jake found himself thinking that it was rather pretty for potentially dangerous alien technology. Wait. Alien technology? Where had that thought come from? He was clearly spending too much time reading science fiction novels during his lunch breaks. This was probably just some classified government experiment that someone had forgotten to properly decommission. The kind of thing that would either get him promoted for finding it or disappeared for knowing about it. "Well," he said to the glowing wall, "in for a penny, in for a cosmic horror scenario." He pressed his palm against the center of the panel. The wall dissolved. Not opened, not slid aside, not retracted into a hidden slot, dissolved, like sugar in hot coffee, leaving behind a doorway that revealed a corridor bathed in soft, impossible light. Jake's scanner gave one final, triumphant beep and died completely, small wisps of smoke rising from its display. "I knew I should have called in sick today," Jake muttered, but his feet were already carrying him forward. The corridor beyond defied several fundamental laws of physics, starting with the fact that it was clearly larger than the building that supposedly contained it. The walls were smooth and opalescent, seeming to shift color as he moved, and the floor felt solid beneath his feet despite appearing to be made of crystallized light. The air tasted of ozone and something else, something clean and sharp and utterly alien. Jake realized he was holding his breath and forced himself to exhale. Whatever atmosphere this was, it seemed breathable, which was either a remarkable coincidence or a sign that someone had been expecting human visitors. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing strangely in the impossible space. "Building management? Secret government agency? Interdimensional interior decorators?" A voice answered from deeper in the corridor, warm and amused and speaking perfect, unaccented English. "I'd go with interdimensional interior decorators. They do such lovely work with impossible geometries." Jake froze. The voice was definitely feminine, definitely intelligent, and definitely coming from someone who had been waiting for him. He considered turning around and running, but his curiosity had always been stronger than his survival instincts. It's what made him a good engineer and a terrible judge of risk assessment. "Are you going to stand in the doorway all day?" the voice continued, "or are you coming in? I've been monitoring your progress for the last 10 minutes, and I have to say, your commentary is quite entertaining. Most humans just scream when they find me." Most humans. Jake started walking toward the voice, because apparently his feet had made the executive decision to ignore his brain's increasingly frantic suggestions about retreat. "How many humans have found you?" "Oh, you're the first. I was making an educated guess based on statistical models of human behavior under stress. I'm usually quite good at predictions, but you're turning out to be delightfully unpredictable." The corridor opened into a chamber that made Jake's engineering degree want to hide under a rock and pretend it had never heard of Euclidean geometry. The room was circular, or possibly spherical, with a domed ceiling that displayed what looked like a real-time view of deep space. Stars wheeled slowly overhead, and Jake could see what was definitely not Earth's moon hanging in the cosmic distance. In the center of the room, sitting at a console that appeared to be grown rather than built, was a woman. She looked perfectly human except for her ears, which were long and elegantly pointed, extending several inches beyond what Jake's brain insisted was anatomically possible. Her hair was a shade of silver that seemed to catch and reflect light that wasn't quite there, and her eyes were the color of deep ocean water. She was wearing what looked like a jumpsuit made of fabric that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. She looked up from her console and smiled at him with genuine warmth and barely contained amusement. "Hello, Jake Holloway," she said. "I'm Lyra. Welcome to my office. I apologize for the dramatic entrance. The door was supposed to be completely hidden, but your scanner was broadcasting on frequencies that made my cloaking systems think you were cleared for access. I really must file a complaint with whoever designed Earth's maintenance equipment. The electromagnetic compatibility standards are absolutely appalling." Jake opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and finally managed, "Your office? Well, technically it's an observation post, but I've been here for 12 years now, so it feels like home. Would you like some coffee? I've gotten quite good at synthesizing Earth beverages, though I'll admit the first few attempts were memorable. I once created something that was technically coffee but had the consistency of industrial lubricant and the taste of regret." Jake accepted the coffee, mostly because his brain was still processing the fact that he was having a casual conversation with an alien woman who had apparently been living under his workplace for over a decade. The beverage tasted remarkably like the stuff from the break room vending machine, which was either a testament to Lyra's skill at molecular synthesis or a damning indictment of human coffee standards. "So," Jake said, settling into a chair that had materialized from the floor with all the casualness of office furniture in a very expensive science fiction movie, "observation post. Are you, spying on us?" Lyra's pointed ears twitched slightly, which Jake was beginning to recognize as her version of a suppressed smile. "Spying implies hostile intent. I prefer to think of it as extended anthropological fieldwork. Your species is quite fascinating from a xenosociological perspective. Do you realize that humans are the only known species to invent both nuclear weapons and cat videos within the same century?" "That does sound like us," Jake admitted. "Though I have to ask, if you've been watching us for 12 years, what's your professional opinion? Are we as much of a cosmic embarrassment as I suspect?" "Oh, quite the opposite. Most species take millennia to develop space flight after discovering fire. You managed it in roughly 10,000 years, which is practically instantaneous by galactic standards. The Hegemony Council classifies humanity as a rapid development species, which puts you in the same category as about 6 other civilizations in this galaxy." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. Hegemony Council. Galaxy. How big is this thing we're apparently part of? Lyra waved her hand, and the chamber's ceiling shifted to display what looked like a 3-dimensional star map. Thousands of points of light floated above them, connected by flowing lines of energy that pulsed with different colors. Currently, there are approximately 14,000 member civilizations in the galactic hegemony, spanning roughly 60% of this galaxy. Your solar system is located here, she pointed to a tiny blue dot near the edge of one spiral arm, in what we call the development zone. Development zone? Jake asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew what that meant. Think of it as a cosmic nursery. Species that haven't achieved reliable interstellar travel yet are given space to grow and develop without interference. There are protocols, observation guidelines, non-contamination directives. It's all very bureaucratic and boring, which is why I volunteered for this assignment. Most of my colleagues prefer postings to civilizations that have already invented proper toilet paper. Jake looked down at his coffee cup, which was now displaying scrolling alien text along its rim. Is that why you're here? To make sure we don't blow ourselves up before we figure out how to join the galactic community? Partly. Your species caught the hegemony's attention about 50 years ago when you split the atom. Then you really got everyone's notice when you started launching rockets. But what made them decide to establish a permanent observation post was your recent breakthrough in quantum computing. Apparently, you're developing certain technologies faster than your social structures can adapt to them, which is a classic warning sign for civilizational collapse. That's not reassuring. Lyra's expression softened slightly. Jake, in the time I've been here, I've watched your species create the internet, map your own genome, land robots on other planets, and develop artificial intelligence. You've also somehow managed to make contact with an alien observer through nothing more than curiosity and a broken maintenance scanner. I'm not particularly worried about humanity's long-term prospects. The star map above them shifted, focusing on Earth's solar system. Jake could see what looked like shipping lanes between the planets, marked with symbols he couldn't read. Are there others? Other observers, I mean. 3 others in various locations around your planet, plus a small research station on your moon's far side. Don't look so alarmed, it's completely automated and about the size of a shipping container. We're very careful about the non-interference protocols. But you're interfering right now, aren't you? By talking to me? Lyra's ears drooped slightly. Yes, technically this conversation violates about 17 different sections of the observation protocols. I should have activated my emergency beacon the moment you found the door and waited for a memory adjustment team to handle the situation. Memory adjustment? Jake's engineering mind immediately started working through the implications. You can edit memories. Standard procedure for accidental contact scenarios. Nothing invasive, just a selective edit to remove knowledge of alien presence while leaving everything else intact. Most humans experience it as a minor case of déjà vu and move on with their lives. Jake set down his coffee cup with slightly more force than necessary. But you didn't do that. No, I didn't. Lyra stood and moved to her console, her fingers dancing across controls that responded to her touch with soft musical tones. Partially because your scanner's interference disabled my memory adjustment equipment, but mostly because. She paused, her ears twitching again. This is going to sound ridiculous. Lyra, I'm having coffee with an alien in a room that exists in a space larger than the building containing it while looking at a map of galactic civilization. My threshold for ridiculous is pretty high right now. I was curious about you specifically. Your maintenance record showed a pattern of creative problem-solving that suggested unusual cognitive flexibility. Plus, your personal files indicated a sense of humor compatible with extended isolation scenarios. I wanted to see how a human with those characteristics would react to first contact. So I'm your test subject. More like a conversation partner I've been looking forward to meeting. Lyra's console began flashing with what looked like urgent alerts. Though it appears that conversation may have attracted some unwanted attention. Jake felt his stomach drop. What kind of unwanted attention? The kind that drives black SUVs and carries equipment designed to detect the exact type of quantum signatures this facility produces when it's actively camouflaged. Lyra's fingers flew across her controls, and the star map overhead was replaced by what looked like a real-time view of the research facility's exterior. Jake could see vehicles pulling into the parking lot, and people in dark suits emerging with devices that looked like his maintenance scanner's more aggressive older brothers. "Government?" he asked. "Almost certainly. Your planet has several organizations dedicated to investigating anomalous phenomena. This particular group appears to be quite well-funded and surprisingly well-informed about alien technology signatures." Jake watched through the overhead display as the suited figures spread out around the building, their equipment scanning methodically. "Can they find us?" "Not immediately. My camouflage systems are designed to fool sensors far more sophisticated than anything your species has developed. But if they're persistent and methodical..." Lyra trailed off as one of the figures on the display pointed directly at the section of wall that contained the hidden door. "Or if they're using adapted alien technology themselves, which would explain how they detected my presence in the first place." "Adapted alien technology?" Jake asked. "You mean this isn't the first time something like this has happened?" "Oh no, Jake. You're not the first human to discover one of our observation posts. You're just the first one to do it by accident." Lyra began pressing a series of controls that caused various parts of the chamber to fold away into hidden compartments. The others were all quite intentional, and they all ended up working for organizations exactly like the one that's currently surrounding this building. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's air conditioning. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your government has been aware of our presence for quite some time, and they've been very interested in acquiring our technology. The good news is that they can't get through my defenses without causing a diplomatic incident that would result in Earth's immediate quarantine from galactic society." "And the bad news?" Lyra's ears flattened against her head in what Jake was learning to recognize as her species' equivalent of a grimace. "The bad news is that they don't know you're in here with me, which means they're going to assume you're either dead, kidnapped, or compromised. Any of those scenarios gives them justification to escalate their response considerably." The overhead display showed more vehicles arriving, including what looked like a mobile command center and several trucks carrying equipment that Jake's engineering experience told him was definitely not standard government issue. "So what do we do?" he asked. "Well," Lyra said, her tone taking on the carefully casual quality Jake was beginning to associate with her species' version of gallows humor, "I suppose we could start by not panicking. Panic leads to poor decision-making leads to diplomatic incidents, and diplomatic incidents lead to your entire planet being classified as a quarantine zone for the next few thousand years." "Right. No pressure at all." The first sign that Jake's day was about to get significantly more complicated came when Lyra's console started playing what sounded suspiciously like elevator music, but in a minor key that made his teeth feel anxious. "Is that your alien equivalent of a fire alarm?" Jake asked, watching as Lyra's pointed ears swiveled toward the chamber's entrance like organic radar dishes. "More like a doorbell, actually. A very insistent, heavily armed doorbell with questionable taste in legal documentation." Lyra's fingers danced across her console, bringing up displays that showed the government team had managed to locate the hidden door and were now attempting to breach it with equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. "They're using some sort of quantum resonance disruptor. Crude, but effective against standard hegemony camouflage protocols." Jake peered at the display, his engineering background helping him parse the readouts even though half the symbols looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never seen human mathematics. "How long before they get through?" "At their current rate of progress? Approximately 47 minutes and 32 seconds. Though that estimate assumes they don't accidentally trigger the facility's self-defense systems, which would either disintegrate them entirely or transport them to a holding dimension pending diplomatic review." "You have a holding dimension?" "Standard feature on all observation posts. It's like a waiting room, but with fewer magazines and more existential dread." Lyra stood and moved to what Jake now realized was some sort of equipment locker. She began pulling out devices that looked like the offspring of a smartphone and a ray gun. "The good news is that we have time to implement Plan B." "What's Plan B?" I haven't figured that out yet. I'm usually very good at contingency planning, but my training scenarios never included what to do when a maintenance engineer accidentally discovers your secret base while government agents simultaneously assault your defenses using stolen alien technology. Lyra handed him one of the ray gun phones. This is a universal communicator. It'll translate anything you hear into English and anything you say into whatever language is appropriate for the situation. Try not to point the emitter end at your face. Jake examined the device, noting that it had what appeared to be a safety switch and a setting dial with markings that shifted and changed as he watched. Lyra, when you say they're using stolen alien technology, you mean? I mean that someone in your government has been reverse engineering hegemony equipment for quite some time. The quantum disruptor they're using is based on Valix engineering principles, but modified for human power systems. It's actually quite clever, in a completely illegal and diplomatically catastrophic sort of way. The chamber shuddered slightly, and Jake felt a vibration in his bones that suggested something very large and very powerful was being applied to the walls around them. How illegal are we talking? The kind of illegal that gets entire star systems blacklisted from galactic commerce for centuries. The hegemony takes intellectual property violations very seriously, especially when they involve military applications. Lyra moved to another console and began what looked like a shutdown sequence. The equipment they're using could only have been created with access to actual hegemony technology, which means they've captured alien equipment before. Or aliens. Lyra's expression darkened, her ears flattening against her skull. The hegemony has lost contact with 2 observers in the last 5 years. We assumed they've been reassigned to other sectors, but if your government has been systematically hunting observation posts. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's climate control. That's why you didn't call for backup immediately. You think they might be compromised too. It would explain how they found me so quickly after your scanner disrupted my camouflage. Someone with intimate knowledge of our systems would know exactly what signatures to look for. Lyra finished her shutdown sequence, and most of the chamber's displays went dark. Which brings us to our current situation. I can't risk calling for extraction because it might lead them to other observers, but I also can't let them capture either of us. So what are our options? Well, we could surrender and hope they're interested in diplomatic conversation rather than dissection. We could attempt to fight our way out using my personal defense systems, which would almost certainly result in casualties and interplanetary incidents. Or Lyra moved to what Jake had assumed was a decorative wall panel, pressing her palm against its surface. The panel dissolved, revealing a corridor that stretched away into blue-lit darkness. We could use the service tunnels. Jake stared at the newly revealed passage. Service tunnels. Under a secret alien observation post. Jake, do you really think I've been living under your facility for 12 years without installing proper emergency exits? I may be an xenoanthropologist, but I'm not stupid. Lyra began gathering equipment from various consoles, stuffing devices into what looked like a messenger bag made of the same liquid metal material as her jumpsuit. These tunnels connect to the original foundation systems of your research facility. I've been maintaining and upgrading them for years. Maintaining them how? Let's just say that several of your buildings' mysterious efficiency improvements weren't quite as mysterious as your facility's management team believed. Lyra shouldered her bag and gestured toward the tunnel entrance. I've been optimizing your electrical systems, upgrading your data infrastructure, and fixing about a dozen safety violations that your previous contractors somehow missed. You really should have fired those people years ago. Jake followed her into the tunnel, noting that the walls were lined with conduits and cables that definitely weren't part of the original building specifications. You've been secretly maintaining our entire facility? Someone had to. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to run sensitive monitoring equipment in a building with electrical systems designed by the lowest bidder? I spent my first year here just trying to get a stable power supply without triggering your circuit breakers every time I ran a deep scan of your internet traffic. The tunnel branched ahead of them, with passages leading off in directions that Jake was fairly certain were geometrically impossible given the building's layout. Lyra, exactly how extensive are these modifications? Well, let's see. I've upgraded your power grid, installed redundant data pathways, improved your HVAC efficiency by approximately 30%, and added a few strategic structural reinforcements that should keep the building standing in the event of moderate seismic activity. Lyra paused at an intersection, consulting a device that projected a three-dimensional map of the facility. Oh, and I may have accidentally fixed that persistent leak in the third-floor men's restroom. That was you? Maintenance has been trying to find that leak for months. It was interfering with my equipment. Water damage and sensitive alien electronics don't mix well. Lyra chose the left passage, leading them deeper into what Jake was beginning to realize was a completely rebuilt version of his workplace. I also took the liberty of upgrading your internet connection. Your previous bandwidth was frankly embarrassing. They emerged into a larger chamber that Jake recognized as being somewhere in the facility's basement level, though it had been extensively modified with alien technology. Banks of monitoring equipment lined the walls, displaying readouts in scripts that flowed and shifted like living text. The air hummed with the sound of machinery that was simultaneously completely foreign and oddly familiar. "This is incredible," Jake said, examining the seamless integration of human and alien technology. "You've basically rebuilt our entire infrastructure." 12 years is a long time to be bored, Lyra said with a shrug. "Besides, improving your facility's efficiency was the least I could do while I was secretly studying your species' behavioral patterns. Think of it as rent." A new alarm began sounding, this one definitely coming from the facility's human security systems. Jake recognized the pattern. It was the general evacuation signal, which meant someone upstairs had decided that whatever was happening in the basement was serious enough to clear the entire building. "That's probably good," Lyra said, checking her displays. "Fewer civilians in the building means less risk of accidental exposure to classified alien technology. Though it also means our government friends now have complete freedom to use whatever methods they deem appropriate to breach my defenses." "How long do we have?" "At their current rate? Maybe 20 minutes before they break through the outer camouflage layer. After that, it depends on how committed they are to preserving the facility's structural integrity." Lyra began entering commands on a console that looked like it had grown from the wall rather than being installed. "I'm implementing Protocol 7, which should buy us some additional time." "What's Protocol 7? Emergency camouflage expansion." "Basically, I'm extending my cloaking field to cover a much larger area, but at the cost of system stability. It'll confuse their sensors and make it much harder for them to pinpoint our exact location, but it also means my equipment will be operating at the edge of safe parameters." Jake felt the chamber vibrate as something massive hummed to life in the walls around them. "And if your equipment overloads?" "Well, the good news is that we probably won't have time to worry about long-term consequences." Lyra's ears twitched in what Jake was learning to recognize as her species' version of nervous humor. The bad news is that an overloading hegemony cloaking system tends to create localized space-time distortions that can have unpredictable effects on surrounding matter. Unpredictable effects. The technical term is creative molecular rearrangement, but I prefer to think of it as aggressive redecorating. Either way, we should probably be somewhere else when it happens. Jake was beginning to think that creative molecular rearrangement might be the most terrifying euphemism he'd ever heard when Lyra's emergency beacon finally activated with a sound like wind chimes having an argument with a synthesizer. "Well, that's either very good news or spectacularly bad news," Lyra said, studying the holographic display that had materialized above her wrist communicator. The text scrolling across it was shifting through what looked like several different alien languages, none of which looked particularly encouraging. "My people are responding to the distress signal, but they're not sending a rescue team." "What are they sending?" Jake asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew the answer would involve more science fiction complications than solutions. "A compliance review board." Lyra's ears drooped in what Jake had learned was her species' equivalent of severe disappointment. "Basically, a committee of bureaucrats whose job is to determine whether Earth should be quarantined from galactic society due to protocol violations. Protocol violations? We didn't even know there were protocols. That's rather the point, actually. Species under developmental observation aren't supposed to discover the observers, steal their technology, or engage in unauthorized first contact scenarios. Your planet has managed to accomplish all three in the span of about 6 hours, which I believe set some sort of galactic record for bureaucratic catastrophe. Jake felt the facility shudder again as whatever the government team was doing to breach Lyra's defenses kicked into high gear. So what happens if Earth gets quarantined? Complete isolation from galactic civilization until you either achieve proper interstellar capability on your own or your species goes extinct, whichever comes first. The average quarantine period is about 50,000 years, though there are some worlds that have been isolated for considerably longer. That seems a bit excessive. The hegemony learned long ago that premature contact with advanced civilizations tends to either stunt natural development or cause complete societal collapse. There are entire museum worlds dedicated to species that discovered faster-than-light travel too early and promptly used it to wage interstellar wars. Lyra began shutting down her remaining equipment with quick, efficient movements. On the bright side, quarantine does include protection from external threats, so you wouldn't have to worry about invasion by hostile aliens. Because we'd be too primitive to bother with? Because anyone who attacked a quarantined world would face immediate military intervention by the entire hegemony fleet. It's one of the few things the galactic community takes more seriously than protocol violations. The chamber's lights flickered, and Jake could feel something changing in the air around them, a pressure shift that made his ears pop and his teeth ache. Is that the space-time distortion you mentioned? More likely it's my cloaking system starting to overload. Protocol 7 was never designed for extended use, and we've been running it for nearly an hour now. Lyra shouldered her equipment bag and moved toward another hidden panel. The good news is that the distortions should make it impossible for the government team to pinpoint our location. The bad news is that they're also making it impossible for me to maintain a stable connection with the Compliance Review Board. Which means they're going to have to make their decision about Earth's quarantine status based on incomplete information and standard protocols. Given the circumstances, that decision is likely to be better safe than sorry. Jake followed Lyra through yet another passage that seemed to exist in spaces that shouldn't have been able to fit within the facility's actual dimensions. There has to be something we can do. Some way to prove that humanity isn't a threat to galactic security. Well, we could try explaining the situation directly to the review board, but that would require establishing stable communications, which would require shutting down my cloaking system, which would expose us to immediate capture by the government agents who are still trying to break into my observation post. Lyra paused at what looked like a maintenance hatch that had been extensively modified with alien technology. Or we could attempt what my people call a field demonstration of species compatibility, though that's traditionally reserved for much more advanced civilizations. What kind of field demonstration? Basically, we prove that humans and hegemony citizens can work together effectively by solving a complex problem that requires both human ingenuity and alien technology. Lyra's ears perked up slightly, which Jake had learned indicated either hope or the kind of desperate optimism that preceded spectacularly bad decisions. In this case, we'd need to resolve the current crisis in a way that satisfies both human authorities and galactic protocol requirements. Jake considered this while listening to the increasingly alarming sounds coming from the facility's upper levels. It sounded like someone was using heavy machinery to dig through reinforced concrete, which was either a sign that the government team was escalating their response or that Lyra's spacetime distortions were having more dramatic effects than anticipated. What would that actually look like? He asked. We'd need to establish communication with both sides simultaneously, present a solution that addresses everyone's concerns, and implement it in a way that demonstrates human-alien cooperation rather than conquest or subjugation. Lyra opened the modified hatch, revealing a ladder that led upward into what appeared to be a normal maintenance shaft. The tricky part is doing all of that without getting shot, vaporized, or diplomatically censured. Right. No pressure. They climbed the ladder in companionable silence, emerging into a utility room that Jake recognized as being on the facility's main level. Through the walls, he could hear the sound of multiple vehicles and what was definitely some sort of heavy construction equipment. The government team had apparently decided that subtle infiltration was less important than rapid results. "Lyra," Jake said as she began setting up what looked like a portable version of her communication equipment, "when you said field demonstration, exactly how much of this depends on me not screwing things up?" "Well, you managed to find my observation post using nothing but curiosity and a broken scanner. You've adapted to first contact with an alien civilization without panicking or trying to dissect me, and you've spent the last few hours helping me evade capture while maintaining a sense of humor about the whole situation." Lyra's equipment hummed to life, projecting holographic displays that showed communication channels to both the government forces outside and the hegemony review board somewhere in space. "I'd say your track record for not screwing things up is actually quite good. That's surprisingly reassuring. Jake, in 12 years of observing your species, I've seen humans at their worst and at their best. You represent exactly the kind of person who gives me hope that humanity deserves a place in the galactic community." Lyra began entering commands that caused her displays to shift and stabilize. "Besides, the worst that can happen is that we fail completely and your entire planet gets quarantined for the next 50 millennia. That's basically Tuesday for a galactic bureaucrat." The communication system finally synchronized, and Jake found himself looking at two very different but equally intimidating groups of faces. On one display, he could see what was clearly the government team that had been trying to break into Lyra's facility, men and women in dark suits carrying equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. On the other display, he saw beings that were definitely not human, though their expressions of bureaucratic annoyance were surprisingly universal. "Attention human authorities," Lyra said, her voice carrying the kind of formal tone that suggested she'd done this before. "I am Observer Lyra, 7429 of the Galactic Hegemony Development Watch. I am currently in communication with your Compliance Review Board regarding the unprecedented contact situation that has developed at this facility." Agent Sarah Cross, who Jake recognized as the leader of the government team, stepped forward on the display. "Observer, we are prepared to discuss terms for the transfer of alien technology and personnel to proper human authorities for study and integration." One of the alien bureaucrats, Jake couldn't tell what species it was, but it had an impressive collection of tentacles and what looked like a very expensive suit, immediately began making sounds that the universal translator rendered as absolutely unacceptable violation of 17 different treaty provisions. "Right," Jake said, stepping into view of both cameras, "I think we might be approaching this from the wrong angle." Both groups turned to stare at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely contained hostility. Jake realized that his next words would probably determine whether Earth joined the galactic community or spent the next 50,000 years in cosmic isolation. "Agent Cross, you want access to advanced technology that could benefit humanity. Review Board, you want to ensure that human development follows proper protocols without disrupting galactic stability. What if there was a way to accomplish both goals? Such as," the tentacled bureaucrat asked, its translator rendering the question in tones of polite skepticism. "A formal development partnership. Instead of hiding observers and stealing technology, what if Earth became an official development world with voluntary human participation in the advancement process?" Jake looked between the two displays, his engineering mind working through the logistics. Humans get access to carefully managed advanced technology and guidance, the hegemony gets willing research subjects and cultural exchange, and everyone avoids the diplomatic nightmare of a forced quarantine. Agent Cross frowned. That would require significant changes to current government policy regarding alien contact. It would also require unprecedented modifications to development protocols, the alien bureaucrat added. No species has ever been granted partnership status prior to achieving independent interstellar capability. Lyra stepped forward, her ears perked with what Jake now recognized as cautious optimism. "However, no species has ever demonstrated the combination of technological advancement, social adaptability, and cooperative potential that we've observed in humanity." Jake's solution to this crisis demonstrates exactly the kind of creative problem-solving that suggests humans could be valuable partners rather than subjects requiring isolation. The review board would need extensive documentation of human-alien compatibility, another alien official said, this one appearing to have crystalline features that reflected the room's lighting in dazzling patterns, which could be provided through controlled interaction programs managed jointly by human authorities and hegemony observers, Jake said, feeling increasingly confident about the direction of the conversation. Small scale at first, expanding based on results and mutual agreement.